Before we even get into the game, there's one thing I wanted to point out. If you remember, in every Resident Evil, there is a tradition where there is a voice actor who would repeat the Resident Evil you are playing. But the remake didn't even try to do this. I just thought it was funny to point out.
Resident Evil 4.
Now, before you get into the game, you do get a monologue from Leon. Both game does this, but I will say the older actor just does a way better job at voice acting this part.
September 30th, 1998. It's a day I'll never forget. The cop inside me died that day.
1998. I'll never forget it. It was the year when those grisly murders occurred in the Arklay Mountains.
I think it's just more crisp and more, there's more life to it. There's more, it just sounds clearer. It's just easy to the ears. There you go. But not that the remake did not do very well at this. It's just the original just did that a lot better. During the drive scene, I've noticed a couple of differences, but the first thing I've noticed is the music. The remake has a lot of echoes or reverb, as you will, during the guitar plugs.
It has to.
Received special training via a secret organization working under the direct control of the president.
And I don't know why they went with this radio effect for the singers' voices, but no big deal. Second thing I've noticed is the shot of Leon did not come from the window's reflection like it did in the OG. The remake just did some type of Premiere Pro transition from the monologue to the drive, but not too big of a deal.
So tell me, Yankee, why did you come to this horrible place? As close to nowhere that I've ever seen.
Now that line, as closest to nowhere as I've ever seen. I didn't notice that before playing this game, but the remake outright tells you that you're in the middle of nowhere, when in the original you would have to explore for yourself and make that conclusion that you're in the middle of nowhere based on the village, based on the atmosphere and the exact spot. It seems like you're in the middle of nowhere. Now, the third thing I've noticed was the joke Leon made towards the policia, if you will.
The chief gave the orders himself. Help him, he said.
I'm sure you boys didn't come all the way out here to roast marshmallows.
You know what this is all about. My assignment is to search for the president's missing daughter.
What? All by yourself?
I'm sure you boys didn't just tag along so we could sing Kumbaya together at some Boy Scout bonfire. But then again, maybe you did.
Now, Leon's joke in the original could be considered as lame or corny, but at least it was edgy, if you would consider that to be edgy. And it was funny. It made sense. It seems like in the remake, it's being forced almost. Like even that line where he says, maybe you did.
Maybe you did.
That line just felt forced. It felt like Leon has no sense of humor, but he is forcing and trying to have a sense of humor, if that makes any sense. Just take the two side by side. If you heard the clip that I've shown, just the delivery maybe is the problem, but I feel like it's just, yeah, it might be the voice actor or the tone that the developers were going for, because just that delivery was just so brutal. It just seems like Leon had no sense of humor, but in the original it feels like he was cocky and funny, you know, without even trying, if that makes any sense. Now, I did skip the police guy peeing part because it's fairly the same, but I will say the remake did try to, you know, show you that this place is a very dark place and very scary part, which is a good thing. Now, the remake did pretty well at the start of the village. The plant covering up nearly the entire entrance, dead animals, broken pile of wood everywhere. Does this remind you of anything? Well, that's because this is exactly how Resident Evil 7 looks. And this is the first encounter of this new RE engine not having an art style almost. Not that it completely doesn't have an art style, but it almost feels like it's not unique. Especially in Resident Evil 4. And it really didn't capture the in the middle of nowhere, that like the cop told you in the beginning. It really didn't capture that atmosphere. You just walk straight right into the house. Now, comparing this to the original RE4, as soon as you were dropped off, this shot right here says it all. You could clearly see that this place was in the middle of nowhere with the dead trees and dead grass everywhere. It seems like there is no life here at all, right? Fog all in the background. And this is where the art style really started to show with the yellow/brownish filter to the atmosphere. I mean, I don't know what the remake was going for. Maybe I got a little bit of darkness and, gore. I don't know, but very Resident Evil 7-ish, if I may say so. Now, dealing with inside of the house, I will say the remake did well here also. Even better than the old one because it had its moment. For example, that basement scene where you're forced to fight that ganado. That was pretty scary. But the things that were missing from the remake were going back to see what happened to the Spanish cops.
No.
Being able to jump through windows yourself, remember that scene? And being able to mess with the Spanish cops during the time they dropped you off.
Forget your makeup or something?
These are small little charming and funny things that are cool things I guess the devs didn't think were cool enough to implement into this remake or remake themselves. During the introduction of the village, you do get the opportunity to fight more ganados. This is the first instant where the difference in sound design really started to show. I think it's best you hear it. Now, I didn't raise or lower any volumes. In fact, the remake is a lot louder than the original. But the El Forasteros in the original just sounds a lot better. It had more life to it. While in the remake, it felt less intense. Also, the music is way too low in the remake. This game got hit by the curse of modern gaming mixing. By that I mean every modern game, especially the horror ones, for some reason love mixing every sound equally, which lessened the intensity and the scary aspect of the game. Because as you can see in the original, certain things had to be lowered just to raise, certain part of the, the music. For example, like Leon's footstep on the grass had to be lowered. The waterfalls flowing had to be lowered just for the music to be raised up and for the Ganado's voice to really shine into your ears. And I think also the Ganado's voice is more crisp, and again, it has more life to it. It just feels more intense. And may I take this opportunity to just show off again the art style in the old game. I really, just something about the old game. Remember, it's about to rain. I love how the sky is gray and it's very cloudy here. Really takes on the dark and greedy tone. I also remember people saying RE4 was not scary. Well, here's an instant where I remember being creeped out. If you remember this part of the game where they nailed this lady with a pitchfork onto the wall. I mean, I remember being creeped out. I'm not even trying to do too much or overreact, but I remember seeing that part and being very creeped out the first time I've played, of course. Now, before the village fight, while playing both RE4s, there's one thing I've noticed during the binocular scene. Did you notice the difference? You said no? Well, if you look closely, you will see that the original binoculars had coordinates and measurements when used. But in the remake, they didn't even bother to even recreate that. Just Soul versus Soulless. Now, I skipped the village fight because, well, everyone have seen it a million times. But I will say the remake is just a infinite spawn fest of enemies grabbing you and poking you. But I will say it did have its moments, like for instance where the chainsaw man could change the environment if you led him behind the barn, or if you climbed up the ladder that you used to back in the original, it would break the floor just so you wouldn't camp up there. I guess that it had its moments there, but after that, it's just a spawn fest of enemies everywhere. While I gave the remake its credit for getting its inspiration from RE7, I will say the comparison between the two games when it comes to the village is night and day. The remake completely threw out the dark, scary tone it had at the beginning, or at least it tried to impose on you in the beginning. Right here, it is completely it has completely thrown it out. I mean, I will show you some footage. But guys, it is exactly night and day. There's a very big difference. I will say, I don't know what art style this is. This is just strictly, I don't even think this is art, period. This is just a realistic village with barns and cows, whatever. It is just that. The original clearly had a big difference here. I mean, just everything looking abandoned. Again, going back to the gray, cloudy skies. I mean, it seems like it's about to rain heavily. I mean, there's no sun poking out. I mean, in the remake, it's just bright and sunny. There's mountains in the background. I mean, good God, I didn't even notice this difference playing the first time, but really taking my time to explore. It is night and day. Now, another thing I've noticed during playing both games were that in this spot there are less interactive, less things you can interact with, because in the original RE4 you could go around looking at things. Like, for instance, in some of the rooms you could see some of the cooking or some dish that the ganados would make, and you get to comment on them. Remember, you are a cop and you were coming to this area to investigate, so I would think Leon would be able to explore and look at things and comment on things. And mind you, in the original he didn't say anything out loud, so which to me, this is how I took it. I'm not sure if this is what the devs were going for, but how I took it was that Leon was saying things in his head. This was his thoughts. So, but in the remake, usually we'll experience that later down in in the video. The remake, he would just say things out loud and talk to himself, but it's supposed to be thoughts. But those are the small little changes, small little charm changes that were not in the remake. I believe the older Resident Evils uses sound so well. I love how it just fits the setting the player is in. Now, the original handicaps the remake during the farm section when it comes to art and atmosphere. But not only that, the original murders the remake when it comes to sound design. I will let you hear it again. So as you leave the farm, you encounter a dark tunnel. This revealed to me something. As you walk into this tunnel in the original, you could hear water droplets falling inside, which really secured the claustrophobic and moist feeling the tunnel literally gives off. Now, the remake, there's no such droplet. And the revelation that I've, got from this is, every sound that is displayed is in the original is as if it's coming from Leon's perspective. You don't actually have to see anything. If you just hear you walking in the tunnel and all the water droplets falling, it's as if it's coming from Leon's ear. But in the remake, I don't know, it seems like a third person type of audio, and I think it's really cool how the original captures Leon's ear. But I will show more example of this later down in the video. After the tunnel, we encounter another area that shows again the original Resident Evil 4 was actually scary. Encountering this place for the first time, two things I remember that gave me an eerie feeling. The first was the ambient noise, which sets the mood nicely. Second, the thumping of Luis in the house. I noticed in the remake, you did not hear the thumping until you gotten up close to the door.
This the place?
Now, in the original, you could hear it from far away, prompting the player to go and investigate, which, man, it's just the little things that just gets me. Now, when you get inside the house, three things I've noticed. One, the thumping of Luis have gotten louder. Two, the original had light puncturing through the window to expose the dust that shows how the room is uninhabited. To be frank, I don't think the remake actually gave me that feeling the first time I walked in. It's just a dirty, clean room, if that makes any sense. I was really impressed seeing this scenery in the original, down to the scratched up chairs and gray filter that covers everything. Just so good. Also, the explosion in the original is a lot better, sound design wise. After you rescue Luis, I'm fully convinced the devs of the remake had no idea what made Leon cool.
Seemed like you really wanted to talk.
How observant, senor. Now, say, you got a smoke?
You know, those things will kill you.
Oh, well, maybe just untie me then, huh? Okay, I have only one very important question. You got a smoke?
Got gum.
Look how Leon delivered that line in the original. Got gum? I mean, so cool. But in the remake, it felt like he had to give Luis a lesson about smoking cigarettes. We all know cigarettes kill. You don't have to tell the people that smoke cigarettes. But it just, I know it's probably was just foreshadowing Luis's death, but it just comes off as unnatural and it just makes Leon seems uncool. The Valley is an iconic spot. This is the first time you encountered the merchant, if you remember. And God knows the merchant doesn't have the life he used to have.
Over here, stranger. Over here, stranger.
Who's that?
But we will come back to this later. The remake did okay when it came to the Valley, but I believe they did not understand what the devs were going for, as usual. When I first stepped into the Valley, one thing I noticed was how claustrophobic, I'm going to use that word again, it made you feel. I love how they use very tight pathways in the original, an unsecured area. Like, the place does not look secure at all, while the remake uses wide pathways and like everything looked more secure and more supported almost. And I love the sound design in the original. Wind whistling through your ears, wood cracking as if the bridges were on their last nails. I mean, it's just perfect. While in the remake, not so much. Also, I noticed Leon's hair moves with the wind in the original. And in the remake, didn't even bother to try that again. Imagine having an engine like this and not utilizing it. It's just mind-blowing.
blood has accepted the gift.
You carry the same blood as us, it seems. Nevertheless, you're an outsider. Just remember, if you become unpleasant to our eyes, you'll face severe consequences.
Night and day, huh? The Big Cheese accent was 10 times better in the original. Severe consequences. I'm not really that good at it, but man, that performance was just top tier. Now, I'm quickly want to show you the house part because this is where we first see the rich and classic interior design that the original brings to the table. And this is just a taste of what you will see, you know, when you get into the castle. But I noticed the remake didn't even bother to make something like that. You didn't even see all of the pictures on the wall. Well, you've seen some pictures on the wall, but you didn't see Sadler, you know, a couple of missing pictures. But I mean, it didn't even take in that cool interior design that the original had right here. It just went for the RE7 cannibal type design, and it's just so awful. It's such a bad choice. I think it should be unique that way, where it recreates that interior design, and we will get deeper into that, especially when we get into the castle. But as of right now, Now, before we get to Del Lago, it's important to go over the trail to Del Lago. And once again, the original obliterates the remake here. God, I love how you can hear the insects and the other wildlife around you. Not to mention the music that also plays during your encounters. My goodness, even the water sound design outshined the remake here. Now, as your host, it would behoove me to show you the infamous Del Lago jump scare. Now, the remake wasn't a jump scare per se, more of a cutscene that just appeared. While in the remake, it happened in real time very quickly and you really wasn't expecting it. For the Del Lago fight, both games are fairly the same, but the remake takes the cake here. Because if you remember in the original, this fight was extremely janky, especially on the PC. And the remake did fix that here. But I've noticed two things during the fight. First, the Del Lago in the original would open his mouth and you could see the tentacles coming out or like waving out of his mouth as if he too was infected by the Las Plagas. And second, Leon had some Chad-like behavior in the original. If you remember in the original, if you would fall off the boat, Leon would do a swimming animation to the boat and you would have to repeatedly tap X. Now, in the remake, they completely scratched that out. And I think there was also an instant in the original where the Del Lago was super close to Leon as if he's going to eat him. But Leon ended up escaping the Del Lago, which was so cool and intense. I think that's something the remake, again, this is the first, or at least one of the first appearance of the tone down of Leon in this game. So after the lake, it started to rain, and this is a perfect time to provide another scene that proves the original RE4 was scary. The biggest difference between these two scenes is how the Ganado jerks his body as the Las Plagas bursts his head open. While in the remake, it happens behind closed doors. You see a shadow of it, I guess. And can you please tell me how an older game captures the feel of a storm a lot better than a modern game? I've even noticed the clouds moving with the storm. That's how detailed the original was. That's so cool. Ah, the graveyard. The graveyard is one of my favorite areas in the game. It's very simple, but well made. But before I get into that, I would like to talk about the wolves you encounter before the church.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I love how the wolf in the original stands there in the darkness waiting. Nevertheless, in the remake, it triggers a cutscene again and ruins the reveal. That's like one thing I'm going to point out a lot throughout this. It's just how in the original things seem to happen in real time. And this, in the remake, mostly just cutscenes revealing everything. This is the area where I was finally convinced the remake devs didn't really know how to capture the desolate, isolated town feeling the original gave off. What makes it even better is after you rescue Ashely, it rained, which tied everything together so well. With lightning on top of the church, and oh my god, it's just the small things that just gets me here. And if you remember, in the original, you could shoot the bell on top of the church, which would spawn ganados. Do you remember that? Small little detail which did not come back in the remake. Sad. The church is another iconic spot in this game. This is another area where we get to experience the rich interior taste from Sadler. And of course the remake did not capture this as well. In the original, as soon as you walked in, it captures your attention with the detailed banner, the beautiful lighting, even the walls, the rocks they used to design the interior, the dragon heads on the wall breathing out fire, the chandeliers. God, the chandeliers, the bars that goes around in the upper deck. I mean, when it came to the remake, it didn't even do that. I mean, they tried, but God, they did not deliver. But more on this later on when we get to the castle. I love how when you walk inside, the only thing you can hear in the original is just lightning strikes. Nothing else but your footsteps and lightning strikes. Just so cool. Now, I skipped the run to Luis because, well, I don't have a reason why I skipped it, but for your enjoyment, here you go. And of course, the OG beats the remake here. Did you even doubt it? Now, when it came to the cabin fight, the remake was a lot more intense here. But that's because the insane amount of ganados they spawned, which grabs you. And if you played the remake, you know how I feel about that actually if you've seen that video. Couple of things I've noticed during this part. One, they got rid of the ballistic joke.
Leon! Small world, eh? Well, I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
How rude! And I don't believe there's any relevance with my figure and my standing. Who are you?
Oh, excuse me, Your Highness. Perhaps the young lady might want to introduce herself first before asking someone his name.
Her name's Ashely Graham, the president's daughter.
Is she... well, you know.
Don't worry, she's cool.
You.
Hey, listen, about earlier.
Yeah, about that.
Hey, I see you found your missing señorita.
Señorita has a name and it's Ashely. You are?
Name's Luis. Encantado.
Great. We all have names. Now then. Who are you? What are you doing here?
Why? Because of sexism, of course. Second, you cannot get killed by Luis in this part. If you remember from the old one, you could get killed by Luis.
Adios, Leon.
Okay, it's game time. Hordes of them against two of us. Oh, and let's not forget, this world is made up of monsters. You done warming up? Hope you stretched.
Yeah. Now if you'd shut up, we'd be good to go.
Lighten up, cowboy.
Now, the remake had one detail I didn't notice in the original, and that's when you are in this cabin fight, you can see the ganados outside. Now, I shouldn't even be given the remake this, this prop, because remember, both of these games are in different hardware. I would at least think the remake would do something like that.
Hasta luego.
Peak. Just peak voice acting, huh? But since we're here, we might as well talk about the Big Cheese, since he is the first boss that you get to fight in this game. Now, I did skip like the lift area and all that area because, well, the remake didn't even bother to recreate that spot. I'm guessing because, I don't know, laziness, time crunch, I'm not sure. But the Big Cheese is the first boss, and I will say I noticed a lot of things during this boss fight the first time I played it. Even now, I still notice all of these things. One thing I noticed is Big Cheese clothes didn't even burn from the fire. It just cuts into a cutscene and then you just see the reveal. Even though in the original, you know, his clothes burned off and you can see the transformation. But the remake decided to go with a cutscene for this one. Second, Big Cheese talks way too much during this boss fight. Which makes him less intimidating, believe it or not. If you remember in the original, it was just strictly footsteps and the eerie soundtrack. That was it. And which made the fight more tense and him more intimidating, as you could just see him tall and just walking towards you. It was just perfect the way that was made. I think that was just how they should have done it. They should have made it quiet like that. Even though, speaking of soundtrack, I didn't really even hear the soundtrack in the background during the game. I don't know if it's just mixing again. Like I said before, it has to be the mixing, because I could hear him talking and all the fire and him throwing all the logs, but I couldn't hear the eerie soundtrack that, you know, was provided in the original. I think that was just perfect, made it more scary. Number 3. When you would get to second phase, Big Cheese body would split into 2. And what made it extremely special was that the bottom half of Big Cheese would continue walking towards you in the original. But in the remake, it's just a cutscene? I mean, guys, you could see the difference between these two, right? I think that's what really made that special right there. And they just made it a cutscene. Now, when it came to the art style of the barn, I will say not too much you can say here technically, because the barn is a lot bigger in the remake. The remake did change the environment. I will give it that. That's a nice touch. But, I mean, nothing too crazy here, to be honest. But maybe the smoke, you can compare the smoke between the two. How it looks more realistic for some reason in the original, which is baffling. But after that, not too much you can compare here.
Ahí están, matando. Ahí está. Mátalo.
The castle is the best setting in RE4. Before getting into this part, I remember playing the remake for the first time and begging and praying to God, please, please, let them at least keep the art style of the original, at least. And we will see later on if they really did. So after defeating Big Cheese, there is one thing that caught my attention. Did you see it? Yes, the end chapter screen in the remake is extremely soulless. Not just soulless, extremely soulless. You mean to tell me, you mean to tell me the devs seen the original game, right? I would think they'll go back and play it. And they didn't even bother recreating those art where Leon was looking heroic and Ashely was looking for his protection. I mean, this is another instant where RE8 had a huge influence on RE4 remake. So when entering the castle, we are greeted to the Los Illuminados. This section of the castle is not a big deal to me, but I did manage to notice something while playing both games. One, The remake still reminds me of RE8. 2, playing both games, I noticed the original felt more cozy when outside. I'll really show you what I mean. Ah, cozy. Now, I skipped the section you meet Louise for the 3rd time because, well, the remake didn't bother with this neither. Remember when I said I prayed to God that the remake kept the castle's artistic vision? Well, as soon as I walked into the castle for the first time is when I knew the new RE engine has no aesthetics to it whatsoever. It is just realism. At least it's, it's just realism. And this is when I also knew, yeah, this is like RE8. That's the first thing I thought of when I entered this area. And I will show you more example later. Actually, my words don't even matter. I'll show you the example now. Going back and taking my time to look at the castle, I noticed the lighting in some of these modern games are terrible. But I will talk about this in another video. Also, I noticed how detailed the original is despite being in an old hardware. For example, the banners. The banners are detailed as if somebody took the time to draw it. The pillars. The pillars are more pleasant to the eye and are more seen better, again because of this lighting issue that the remake has. The flooring is well designed with colorful rhombuses. The walls are well detailed too, with antique arts engraved into the wall. I mean, it's breathtaking the first time you come from the village and then you enter this nice, you just had to play it for the first time. But I hope you can see it during the comparisons. Now the remake, you just have a foggy floor. Ask me where this fog is coming from. I have no idea. Let's look at the banners. No details, just red with Los Illuminados logos on it. All of it just reminds me of RE8 again. I'm sure you're getting tired of RE8, but it's true. Coming in this section didn't give me the feeling that someone took the time to draw and design any of this. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they imported some stuff from RE8 and RE7. Really, no lie. Now, the part with the Gatekeepers is completely different from the original. Now, if you thought the first section looked like RE8, this part would make you feel like you're playing RE8. It just reminded me of that one underground layer that was in RE8. That's the first thought that came into my mind when getting to this part. But I will give the remake props here because when entering this super dark room, you could clearly hear the Gatekeepers screaming and kicking in the background.
What was that? Do they keep animals down here or something?
But it was immediately ruined by the game triggering some cutscene just to reveal the Gatekeepers. If you remember in the original, you could clearly see the Gatekeepers from the top window or the top room you were in, which prompted curiosity. But what the remake could have done here actually was have the player investigate the sound only to just get bombarded by the Gatekeepers or surprised by the Gatekeepers and having the player to shoot the garage door, that would have been so much more cool and so much more scary. But instead, the player just have to press circle and just stab the garage door in the back. Literally easy. While if you remember in the remake, what made this boss fight hard was the tank controls, and also you couldn't keep your eyes on the garage door at all times, and also when you move, the garage door could hear every movement, which made it so much more difficult. I know that there's loopholes now and it's easier now, but for the first time that was extremely hard. But nevertheless, the remake went with this The Last of Us route of crouching and stabbing, which is disappointing. Now, dealing with the garage doors model, it looks fairly good in the remake, pretty detailed. I have no problem with it there. Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Look, there's a crank over there.
The more I compare the castle, the more I am blown away by the visuals in the OG. The next destination is the crank room. Now, the visuals here are immaculate. Down to the carpet on the floor, the set piece in the middle of the room, the ancient religious paintings on the wall, the marbled pillars. Oh, the marbled pillars. I mean, good lord. And then you have the remake with dirty floors. I don't know what that is. What is that? Tar? Water? I'm not sure. Extremely dark, which doesn't expose any of the walls, by the way. When entering the castle, you're supposed to see the luxury, you know, the lighting. I mean, you're supposed to see the difference between outside, you know, from the village and the castle. Here, I can barely tell the difference. It's still dirty. Things are cluttered. I mean, it still, again, is just reminding me of RE8. Now, I do like the second half part of the crank room because it has this like dragon spewing out water. I mean, I guess it was a cool change. It's something, you know, to add in the empty areas of the water area parts. But after that, the crank room, just the lighting, I guess, maybe is also ruining this area also. It saddens me. And let me not forget the eerie, uneasy soundtrack that is playing in the background, which the remake I didn't even hear. Oh my gosh. Now, after the crank room, I knew which room was next. Now, I will be honest, I was a little scared just because the crank room was a little disappointing, but I still had hope. Again, this is one of my favorite sections of the castle, and the remake took us outside. They completely removed the most artistic, visually great, full of soul and sweat room, which I call the ladies' room, the hanging ladies' room. They remove all of it. This is one of the best sections in the castle. I mean, where do I even start here? Everything in this room looks carefully sketched. I even went back to play this on the GameCube, and it is still breathtaking. Oh, man. For the remake, not even attempting to recreate this has to be a sin. It has to be a gaming sin somehow. Now, before we get to the next section, I would deserve a dislike if I didn't show you the first Navistador interaction. The first time I played this section, this actually brought fear to my heart because of that nerve-wracking soundtrack that entered my ears the first time dropping down there. Not only that, the Navistador treading on the water, wow, invisible. But we will talk about the Navistadors a little later in the video. I mean, there is just such a, I'm going to use a zoomer word here, such a vibe to the old Resident Evil 4. Ugh. Not too much to say about the maze, to be honest. It fairly looks the same. The remake just added more things to do here, but the OG still outshines the remake when it comes to this night and cozy sound. How do you manage to display sounds better from an old hardware is beyond my comprehension.
Run. Now!
Do you remember the cage room? Well, now it's a whole section in the remake, but I will give the remake a little credit because I can tell they actually tried here, because the lighting is a lot better, which reveals the walls and the ceilings, even the floors. The perfect example for this is the elevated floor room, if you remember that room. This place actually looks pretty good. I can tell the devs took some inspiration from the original here, but my problem still stands with this engine. This is not artistic at all. This is not art at all. It is just real floors, pillars that are very realistic. I mean, again, I gave them props for looking good, but it's still not art. I'll put it a better way you can understand. If you go outside and snap a picture with your camera, is it technically art? It can't be, because there's no vision there. It's just a picture you are taking. It's the same with this engine. It is just realistic. That is all it's achieving. It is not achieving a great art style. I believe most games back in the 2000s had to have an art style just for it to be memorable. I cannot remember this game based on its aesthetics because it is just realistic. This is why I say this new RE engine that's came from or rooted from RE7 is the problem, because you can't remake a game like RE4 and leave the art style behind, because that's what made the game. And for this game, again, it is just realistic. I think, yes, they went with this route in this specific room. You know, it looks cool, it looks good, but it's not artistically, you know, it's not art. It's not visually pleasing. It is just realistic. It is just higher pixels with higher frame rates. That's it. Now let's talk about the dining room. The dining room is fine, but it could have been better. It's too lived in, if you know what I mean. In a sense of it's too cluttered and filled with way too many objects, as if it's a storage room. While in the original, everything looks clean, organized, well placed. I bet the devs had a bet on how many things they could fit in this one room because it is just drowning in objects. Another iconic and memorable section of the castle is the armor room. If no other part of the castle was a disappointment to you, this will surely bring tears to your eyes. Fog again? Now I gave props to the remake for at least trying in the previous rooms, but they didn't even bother here. What were the devs even thinking? There is no art, no lighting, fog everywhere. I did not understand this room at all. While we are here, we might as well talk about the armaduras. While the model for the armaduras are okay, what happened to the heavy foot sounds that they had before?
Come on, you can't be serious.
And also the devs went with this exposed Las Plagas look, which is not a big deal. But I remember in the original, what made this enemy captivating, at least the first time I've played it, was the wonder of how is this armor even moving? Is there a soldier inside? Fun fact, I used to think the reason after you shoot, the Las Plagas would expose itself is because after the bullet impact to the armor, it would vibrate the armor, which irritates the Las Plagas, which forces it to burst the armor's head and, exposes itself. I think that was very cool.
Oh, no.
Now, in my previous review of this game, I said I liked the Ashely section in the remake. While I still hold that belief, I still think the original had a way better atmosphere than the remake here. Now that's a great use of fog. The original made this section feel lonely and isolated, way more than the remake did. But that's because Ashely in the remake talks and reacts to everything around her.
Is that a clock? A hidden staircase? It must lead to a secret room or something.
She even comments on some puzzles you're supposed to do. She even screams when the enemies are around. While in the original, she's quiet and all you hear is her moan whenever she gets hit by the enemies. Also, the armaduras weren't exposed to the player until this section, so the player had no idea what the armors could do. So that frightened the player when they started to randomly chase Ashely down in the basement. While in the remake, you fought them way before the Ashely section, which as soon as you hear the armors moving, you had an idea of what's to come. Next, Ashely and Leon's adventure continued to the Ballroom. The Ballroom is completely different from the original. It's extremely cluttered, not visually pleasing. I know I've said this before, but this is so true in this room. But it's not visually pleasing at all. This room wasn't really that artistic in the old game. Okay, scratch that. Maybe I was wrong there. Remember in the review I made for this game where I said this room was 1-to-1 with the original? Well, I must have been smoking some kind of new governmental drug because the remake didn't even come close, well, artistic wise. Yeah, that drug must have been strong. Also, another change I've seen in the grottos quickly is that in the remake, their hooks stay in their hands like fully extended. But in the original, you could hear their hooks going in and out, like getting extended and then, you know, going back in, getting extended. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you can hear their hooks moving in the original, which I think that's one little change that they had.
Please do continue. All the words. Aquí nos despedimos, Señor Kennedy.
How dare you! No more games! Kill him! Kill!
Now, before we get to the Verdugo, we pass through a sewer. I will be honest, the remake added a little bit here, but not too big a deal. Now, before I compare the two, I want you to close your eyes and you tell me which one makes you feel like you're in a sewer, and also see if you can figure out which one is the remake. Shouldn't be very hard. Now before we get to the Verdugo boss fight, it's important we look at the model for Verdugo. I really just like saying that word. All in all, the remake didn't butcher him, but I will say the original one looked more menacing than the remake. I think it might have to do with those glowing eyes, honestly. Now when it came to the Verdugo boss fight, it is literally night and day. I mean, see for yourself.
Oh, you're kidding me.
What was the first thing you noticed in this section? Well, I'll be honest with you, the first thing I noticed was that the music is more creepy. I also noticed the Verdugo is swinging underneath Leon, which that's the first time I've noticed that. Don't you for a second thought I forgot about the environment in this section? Do you see what I mean when I said this realistic engine is not artistic at all? It's just a jumbled mess. And what happened to this nice air conditioning or refrigerated sound design that is in this section? Honestly, the biggest sin of this section is the disappearance of the flickering lights. I really love how every section in the original was just memorable. Not too much to say here, but I'll let the comparison do all the talking for me. What's most memorable about this section is the double El Gigante fight. And best believe I know there's a lot of things here. One, Luis is with you, which makes it extremely annoying. Second, did you see it? The difference here is the environment. Take a look at how the original set the mood so nicely by adding a heat wave effect. And not to mention the sound in this room. Third thing I've noticed is that you can't ride the zipline in this room. Not a big deal, I guess. Except it is a big deal. It's these little things that makes this room memorable. Fourth and final thing I've noticed is that the El Gigante death scene has been cut out. You ask me the reason why? I don't know. Too much edginess? Next, we travel to the Navistador hideout. Remember when I said the Navistadors used to be invisible? Well, now you can see them clearly in the remake. Not a big deal, I guess. Now, the Navistador's hideout is completely different in both games. Main problem is, well, again, there's no art style and no environment, no sound design, good sound design. And most important of all, Luis is with you still being annoying.
I hate insects. Take care of them for me, would ya?
How about you open fire instead of your mouth?
You know, the first time I entered this room, I couldn't even tell which section this was in the remake. It wasn't until the monk dropped the spiky ball my brain started to put pieces together. Did you really expect this room to have atmosphere and art? That's not even my main problem of this room. My main problem of this room is that it is a combination of the clock tower and Salazar's room from the old game. And remember, this part had such great level design. In this room, there was a secret platforming around the back that would reward the player if they just took the time to, explore this area a little bit. Not to mention the view from up here.
A most warm welcome to my castle. Such a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance, Mr. Kennedy.
Who the hell are you?
Me? Oh, please, call me Ramon. And allow me to get straight to the point. I was starting to wonder when you might notice us.
Who are you?
Me llamo Ramon Salazar, the 8th Castellan of this magnificent architecture.
Ah, Salazar. Salazar, by the way, is supposed to look like a child. So can you tell me what is this? The remake just made him look like an old midget here. There's no youth to him, not to mention his voice acting has been butchered.
Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kennedy.
No thanks, bro.
And what happened to the hat? The hat! Oh, that's right. It was left in the previous room. But I will give the remake credit, this boss fight is less janky than the original. But the boss design in the arena got dookied on. Seriously, what happened to this? Oh, the island. Everyone's least favorite part of this game, which I kinda understood, but the island had some great sections to it. Well, the original, that is. Before we get to the island, Leon stumbles into Ada. And yeah, this scene is ruined by Ada's voice acting, but the bigger problem of this scene is that when Ada is grappling off the boat in the remake, the boat is still moving, which would make it fairly hard to grapple off. But in the original, it completely stopped, and then she grappled off. And also, the remake forgot one line that sums up this whole encounter.
Women.
Don't tell me pre-rendered backgrounds were peak now. How is it that the remake didn't even bother to put the village in the background when, you get to the island? Oh, I know. They didn't really play the original to even think to put that in. Don't tell me it's a hardware issue, because it's really not. The cool laser puzzle here got replaced with some moving turret guns. And also, what happened to my guy JJ? Oh, that's right. They replaced them with this pig mask arrow guy. The problem with this is we've already seen the pig enemy already. Before you played the island section in the original, you'd never seen JJ before. So he's like a new enemy. But in the remake, you've already seen the pig before, and it's so weird that they just added a little turret to his, or a little spinning wheel arrow in his hand, which I guess that's different. Even the caves in the remakes are soulless. The next section, we get hit with the Rocket Man, if you remember that guy. And this section is fairly the same, except I noticed the flaming barrels are missing here. And what happened to the funky music playing in this area? The island doesn't get enough credit in this game. It has some pleasant spots here. The first room had cluttered, dampy, moldy hallways. Not to mention it was so quiet. I really love that sound design of just footsteps and quietness. It really sets up the player. And also everything is everywhere because it's supposed to be a dumping ground for everything. Not to mention this is where all of the experiments happened. I tried to find some of the rooms in the remake and they are there. It's just too dark for most of the parts. But at least I found the Burning Man room. I mean, come on, look, it just looks so much more intense in the original. Not to mention, the furnace that the Burning Man came out of just stopped being on fire. It's just so disappointing. The little details matter. One iconic section from the island is the first time you meet the Regenerator. Remember in the beginning where I mentioned that the sounds that are displaying in the original seem like it's coming from Leon's perspective? Well, this room is a perfect example of that. It sounds like you're in a refrigerator, doesn't it? I love the blood on the wall, the swinging lights, great visual. And in the remake, it's extremely dark. Maybe there's blood splattered on the wall, but who knows? After picking up the key card, you hear the door get torn down. Only to get surprised by the regenerator. And in the remake, it seemed like it just spawned behind the door. That is hilarious. The freezer is another memorable spot. That's because this is where you get trapped in with the regenerator after the door locks behind you. Too bad for the remake, because I don't even think the remake bothered to lock the door behind you. I believe you can just run out and bring the regenerator out and then run back in and pick up the level 2 keycard, which is hilarious. And oh yeah, art. And here looks so beautiful. And then in the remake, it's okay. It's just the original is heavenly sound, and the remake is just. The second freezer room introduced the spiky regenerator. The more you travel throughout the island, the more you learn that it is not just a dumping area, but it is also a laboratory. And this freezer section displayed that very well. I will give the remake credit here. It has a great use of fog, but there's no clean scientific art style that the original gave off. I mean, this area had some surprisingly great visuals that the remake didn't even bother to recreate. That is crazy.
Looks like this is it.
Ugh, it stinks.
Sure does.
No way, Leon.
Way.
What a Chad. And of course the remake skipped this part. You just walk straight in. How boring. While I'm here, I do want to talk about the regenerator. I hate the new look for the regenerator. Why does it look like a blob? There's actually more details in the original than in the remake. In the sound of the regenerator. While the normal regenerator looks like a gray jello disgusting blob, the spiky regenerator looks awesome in the remake. I have to give it credit. There goes another area where realistic graphics or realistic engine doesn't do anything. After this, Leon and Ashely go to the Wrekingball room. I was genuinely surprised by how great looking the Wrekingball room looked. And this is coming from a guy that played this game a lot. I remember saying this room made no sense in my original review. Well, I was wrong, because it clearly just shows a crane that was crashed into the building that's holding the wrecking ball. I now am disappointed that the remake went with this actual crane and not this room. This room is so beautiful, with the lava pit in the middle, super cluttered and trash everywhere. Just great stuff. While playing, I noticed the remake just switched some areas around. For example, like some areas would come later in the original, would be first in the remake. Great example is the boiler room. After this, we get to lose Ashely one more time, only to see Sadler's face. And what can I say about Sadler's voice acting though?
I can feel them growing ever so strongly inside you. Sadler! Perhaps you can resist, but you cannot discern.
This is our holy body. Our divine providence, and soon such profound blessing for all. Lost blood.
It's a term us gamers call stink, as in it stinks. It is so bad. I thought Sadler was supposed to have an accent here, but he just sounds so weird.
Too soft to do what's necessary.
Witness the power! You've lost it completely, Krauzer.
Ah, Krauzer. I remember me saying Krauzer's arena looked 1-to-1 in my old review. Well, not quite. After taking my time to look around the arena, it has some changes. For example, after battling him during his first phase, that area was different. There's a section in the original that's not there. And finally, the area you beat Krauzer in his second phase. And also, what happened to the exploding robots that Krauzer had? Oh, I guess maybe the devs forgot this time. I'm going to come out and say it. I don't know what it is, but Krauzer's voice acting is not my favorite. This is an opinion, of course, but something's off. I think it might be the way he says rookie.
Rookie.
Now, I almost fell into the temptation of skipping the second part of the island, but I believe there are some key points to mention. Of course, I still have the same problem I've always had with the remake, but despite that, there was one thing that was vexing. Did you see it? Yes, the texture for the helicopter bullets. How in the world can this possibly go through quality control and make it in the final product? I mean, look at this. After this, we make it to the safe room, aka the Rule 34 room. In this section, I just want to pinpoint the details that the remake failed to attempt. I know, Kel Surprise. I'll let you take a look.
Someone had a field day looting the Umbrella Labs.
Mind you, this is a GameCube game, and I know the remake allows you to shoot monitors, but one, does not break like this, and two, does not even sound like this. I also think it's hilarious how Leon uses the machine on Ashely first in the remake, not knowing if it will kill her or not, but in the original, he had to try it first, in case it was fatal. It's just hilarious. Now after you heal Ashely, everything is pretty much the same, maybe except the boss fight arena. Didn't really get to compare it because, well, you can't really traverse in the boss arena because the remake doesn't even let you. Yeah, it happens in the original, but the remake just ends the whole area. But after that, the jet ski event is the same. I will say the remake added a little bit more, so kudos, I guess. Now I know what you original Resident Evil 4 players are thinking. Gibby, you missed a lot of sections. Well, that's because the remake had a lot of cut content. So if you haven't played the original and want to see them, you can just go and play the original. Check it out. What is this? I don't like this. This is too soulless for me. There we go. A true ending presentation for a true Resident Evil 4 fan. This video was supposed to be this nitpicky, even though I feel like I've missed a couple of details. For example, like you being able to shoot through wooden doors. That's something I don't even think you can do in the remake, honestly. And also, I didn't really speak on the Ada DLC because, well, most of the sections of the Ada DLC are like the base game. Even though in the remake there is the U3 cut content, but for the most part, it's the same thing. And also, I've made a whole video about the Ada DLC already, and I gave you all my thoughts. There's really nothing to speak on, you know? So, yeah. So it turns out RE4 Remake has a deluxe edition that was released. I actually didn't know this, but I did watch a video on it. I was recommended a video, so I decided to watch. And this YouTuber decided to compare the two, the old deluxe edition and the new deluxe edition. It's actually night and day. Look how generic the RE4 Remake's case look, CD case at that. And then look at it next to the old game. Remember also the old game had like a chainsaw controller. You remember that? How come they didn't even try to do that? I think that would have been so cool if they would have done something like that. But I think it is just mind-blowing how the old one, that case looks so beautiful. Man. The RE4 remake wasn't as great as I wanted it to be. But that doesn't mean it's complete garbage, you know? That's because I think the original is masterpiece tier, which puts a lot of pressure on the remake, which make me a little worried about the next remake. If they can cut things like the ballistic jokes and looking up Ashely's skirt, what's going to be RE5 remake? Only God knows that. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for making it this far. This is probably the longest one yet, but I appreciate you watching this far. I do want to make more videos like this. I have another one I'm thinking of, another idea like this, and it has to do with Dead Space. That's all you have to know. And I want to make another video like this again. The next few videos should be pretty good. I think we have the Call of Duty tier list, which I've been working on also, which I have to finish. And then we should have a retrospective again, which would be cool, of one of the games I feel like you should play, right? One of these old games. Why not do some retrospective? I know people think I'm negative, Gibby's negative all the time. But that's because, well, you know, modern games aren't my thing, at least as of right now. So why not make some retrospective just so people can, you know, see the channel and be like, okay, at least he likes some games. At least the people that are looking and at the channel, because there's some people that just see few videos and instantly think I hate every game, which is not true, of course. Even this game, you know, I wouldn't sit here make a almost 2-hour long video if I didn't really like RE4. So again, thank you for watching. Thank you for making it this far. I appreciate you. You might want to hit the like button on this one because I don't know if this is going to go you know, towards the algorithm. I mean, if you want, of course, but thanks again for watching. That's all that matters.